African Americans in World War II by Caden and Ashton. During World War II, African Americans, also known as the tan soldiers as the press called them, they played significant roles in the United States Armed Forces by serving all branches of the military, contributing to the win of World War II. Over 900,000 African Americans joined us.
Why? Why would these people stand and fight for a country that discriminated against them for so long? Why fight for a country that didn't fight for them and their rights? However, before we can answer these questions, we need more context. At the time of deployment into designated military branches, racism and segregation in the South, along with other places in the U.S., was still at a high. Blacks in school to daily life were discriminated against and labeled differently compared to whites.
Along with this, African Americans were limited to what they could do in the military. An example of this is that they were not permitted to work at sea. Blacks could not serve in the Marines, and they could only serve limited and common positions in the Navy and Coast Guard. Most were limited to labor platoons. And following the Civil War, the Army disbanded volunteer colored regiments and established 6 regular Army regiments of black troops with white officers. They argued that such a step would undermine military efficiency and negatively impact the morale of white soldiers, kids being watched by parents, discrimination, and segregation. Now we can answer the question, why? Why any of this?
Fighting for respect. African Americans had something to prove, not just to the military, but to the entirety of the United States, to end segregation and racism. During World War I, African Americans attempted the same thing with the same intentions and goals, but fell short. They were not going to give up, and World War II came around, and it was another opportunity. In 1945, all blacks were able to serve alongside other divisions and fight.
Many African Americans served with distinction, receiving medals for bravery and valor. However, none was awarded for the highest military award, the Medal of Honor, for a role during the war. Examples of famous African Americans throughout can be recognized as the 761st Black Panther Tank Platoon, the Tuskegee Airmen, and African Americans fighting during the Battle of the Bulge. The Black Panther Tank Division led a push into France and Germany. The push lasted 183 days. The Tuskegee Air Division was a black-only division of fighter pilots. Their division helped fight other planes and performed bombing runs. Also, during the Battle of the Bulge, American troops were outnumbered. Black divisions stepped in and fought alongside to win the battle. The end of segregation and discriminatory practices against African Americans began with President Roosevelt's Executive Order 8802, issued on June 25, 1941. Roosevelt had been under pressure to desegregate the military by civil rights groups, and the order was apparently his way of avoiding a march of 100,000 blacks on Washington, threatened by labor organizer A. Philip Randolph, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the National Urban League. The order created the Fair Employment Practices Commission to eliminate racial discrimination in the armed forces. However, it was underfunded and understaffed, and its powers were limited. As a result, it didn't work out as intended, and discriminatory practices continued for the duration of the war and beyond. On July 26, 1948,
President Truman issued an executive order
9981, which ended any form of segregation in armed forces as well as in schools and neighborhoods. It took until 1954 for all the black-only units to be disbanded.
African Americans were recognized for their work, and eventually contributed to where we are today.
ask me what I got on. They be like, hey, Brandon, what you got on? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. That splat. That's that splat right there.